This is gonna be a bad angle. Back in the shadows. My Christmas gift to my sister this year was a list of my favorite albums from last decade, the 2010s. If you're watching this in like 2030. I had a lot of fun putting it together. The hardest part was sequencing the albums from 12 to 1, sort of ranking them. I ended up doing 12 albums. But it wasn't very difficult to determine my favorite album of the decade. That's this bad boy right here. Peasant by Richard Dawson. It's easily my favorite album of the 2010s, one of my favorite albums of all time, and I just kind of want to talk about it because it inspired me. So if you're not familiar with Richard Dawson, like I wasn't before I listened to this album, there's another Richard Dawson, a more famous Richard Dawson, who was like a game show host. Not talking about him, talking about the British avant folk artist. If you are familiar with Richard Dawson, then you'll probably know that he is known for his experimental take on folk music, his innovative use of guitar, his unique playing style, which I'll get into, his unique vocal delivery, which is probably my favorite aspect of his music. He's got such a great voice. And this album is definitely experimental. There are parts of the album that are just kind of way out there, but a lot of it is super approachable and super relatable. That makes for a very interesting listening experience. On Peasant, Richard Dawson combines his trademark experimental sounds with the sounds of medieval folk music to create quite a journey. It's like touching a time crystal and being transported back into medieval England. It feels that immersive to me. Each of the tracks on the album is a different story. So for example, you've got like a story written by a soldier going to war. You got a story of a homeless man with a dog. That's a sad one. I'll talk about all these later. Really interesting concept for an album. I know folk music is historically has been based around telling stories, but this kind of puts a twist on it that I haven't really heard done this well. You know, it has that medieval, I guess you could call it a medieval gimmick. It avoids being cheesy. It's clear that he put a lot of care into the songwriting, and building the environment turned out great. One of the primary things keeping this from being accused of being too gimmicky is Dawson's songwriting ability and just his straight up musical chops. I mean, he is an excellent guitarist and an excellent vocalist. Right, so let's get into it. Let's get into the tracks. I'm excited to describe all the tracks because they're all interesting in their own way. I just love the stories that are being told. Actually, but first we gotta talk about the opening track. It's called Herald. It's your classic opening track. There are no lyrics. There's not really any interesting musical developments. Basically, it's just a series of burping horns. To be honest, I didn't really enjoy the opening track too much my first couple listens. I didn't feel like it was going anywhere. But since then, it's really grown on me. I find it really endearing and funny. I wouldn't have this album without the opening track. Herald then transitions into the first proper track of the album, which is Ogre. It's a song about Shrek, I believe. No, just a normal ogre. So here's where Dawson's lyrical stylings come into play, his ability to build a world through lyrics. So this is a story about a small village on like the outskirts of some town in Britain where a child goes missing and everyone searches for the kid. Eventually they do find him dead in a cave, which is unfortunate. The village puts the blame on an ogre that lives quite a ways away. They all start freaking out about the ogre, preparing for an eventual ogre attack, it sounds like. I don't know if the ogre actually killed the kid. It's never revealed in the song. I don't know what ogres are like in Dawson's headspace. Maybe they are kid killers, but maybe they're not. This village seems to think so, though. Without much evidence, they marched to this ogre's dwelling and prepared to kill it. Might be a statement on mob mentality, you know, where you don't have to do a lot of convincing to make a large group of people do something rash. As far as the music goes on this track, it's incredible. The instrumentation is basically perfect for setting tone. It really sets up the tone for the entire album. A good display of Dawson's vocal range. During the choruses, it's kind of like raw, vulnerable. After the song transitions into the second half, where the village is actually going to the ogre's cave, he is showing off some very powerful falsetto wailing, trading off with this group chorus representing the residents of the village. The percussion is very stompy, very simplistic, which definitely adds to the historic feel of the album. Nothing too crazy here, but I do like it a lot. And this song features a straight up guitar solo, kind of out of nowhere. I can't tell if it fits or if it doesn't. I don't really care because I love it a lot. It's just kind of a rockin' guitar solo. I think it's great. Ogre is a really great start to this album. It's one of my favorite tracks, and it was the first song I listened to from Richard Dawson, and it really got me hyped up for the rest of his stuff because I didn't quite know what I was listening to, but I knew that I loved it. The second track is called Soldier. It's about a soldier. All of the song titles are descriptive of like the focus of the song. This song starts off with some kind of aimless guitar noodling. A lot of the tracks actually open with some aimless guitar noodling. I think it might be one of Richard Dawson's favorite things to do. The noodling transitions into a very beautiful song focusing on a soldier who is preparing for battle, who's very scared about dying. He just wants to go home and spend time with the person that he loves. He actually ends up fleeing battle, deserting the army with the hopes of going back home, reconnecting with the person that he loves, and then running away with them to some place where they don't have to worry about their responsibilities or death and stress. It's kind of naive, but you know, it's also very relatable. The music sort of ebbs and flows with the soldier's emotions. There are some anxious strings when the soldier is talking about being scared of dying, which is a really nice touch. You know, being afraid of dying, being afraid of your responsibilities, wanting to run away with the person that you love. That transcends time, really. I mean, this is set in the medieval era, but it's still a very relevant story. And this is kind of a theme throughout the album, is that it touches on human emotion and human situations that really are not reliant on the time period. I mean the setting is definitely different, but the feelings are very familiar. The next song is called Weaver, and this one has a lot to talk about. It's one of my favorite tracks on the album for multiple reasons. In order to create the setting, Dawson actually did a lot of research, did a lot of homework. The song is told from a perspective of a fabric dyer, and in order to dye fabrics back in the medieval era, there are all sorts of weird processes that you had to do to extract colors from different materials. He did an interview with Quietus, which I'll link in the description for you to read if you want to. I really recommend it because he's a really good interviewee. He's super witty. He seems like a real personable guy. That hypothetical question where you're asked to choose like a handful of people to have lunch with. Richard Dawson would be on my list for sure. I just really want to hang out with him and see what he's like in person. In the interview, he talks about doing research for this song. He said he did a couple of days worth of research before even starting writing on this song. Really shows off his authenticity, his attention to detail. If he's gonna create an environment, he wants to make sure that it's as accurate as it can be. This song, again, starts with some guitar noodling, and I think now would be a good time to talk about Richard Dawson's guitar playing techniques, because that's one of my favorite aspects of his music. Sometimes he plays like super hard, like really hard, like he's trying to break his strings or something. He incorporates string buzzing and guitar slapping. They add functionality to his guitar. It really seems like he can make his guitar do whatever he wants. The song features some very catchy, bouncy, fun guitar riffage. The character describes what is a regular day dyeing fabrics in the marketplace. This normal day is interrupted when someone falls down a flight of stairs. Turns out this person is pregnant and the fall induced labor. From what I know about medieval medical practices, premature labor has got to be almost certain death in this situation. I mean, if you cut your finger, it's almost certain death. They didn't have medicine. They didn't even like wash their hands. Like everyone was walking around with poop hands. But the woman is taken to a more manageable location, and the childbirth is a success. The weaver sort of reflecting on how beautiful childbirth is, and they get quite emotional in the presence of new life. We then come to the song Prostitute. The story implies that the character was sold into slavery at a very young age so her parents could eat. She mentions being traded for what amounts to a year's worth of grain. She's either forced into sex slavery by the person she was sold to, or at some point she resorted to sex work to make ends meet. She's reflecting on her self-worth, questioning if this really is all that life has to offer. When one of her clients dies in bed, she seizes the opportunity to escape, steals a horse, and rides out of the town. I'm not sure what the future holds for this character, but I wish her the best of luck. As far as the music goes in the song, it's a little sparse, a little dreary. It definitely makes way for the lyrics. This is definitely a more lyric-oriented song. Shapeshifter is probably the silliest song on the album. It sounds just kind of like a silly little anecdotal tale about a guy who gets distracted on a walk and ends up in a bog that he definitely shouldn't be in. I think it starts turning him into a tree. Maybe I'm misinterpreting the lyrics, but I think he starts turning into a tree. Just as he resigns himself to death, he is approached by a hooded figure who gives him a potato. Very nice gesture. Oh, and he also frees him from the bog. After the helpful figure leads him back to town, he turns and leaves. The man notices that this person has a tail, and it's implied by the title of the song that it's some sort of shapeshifter. I love the guitar work in this song. It's fun, and it's bouncy, and it's catchy. It's silly. It shows off Dawson's signature guitar style. I mean, there are parts of the song where it sounds like he's doing a number on his guitar. Scientist is a straight up banger. Oh man, this is an intense song. Intense droning instrumentation that never lets up. Same with the vocals, it's powerful throughout the entire song. An unfamiliar man approaches the temple with some sort of magic device that can let them see the future or something. It's a little vague. So he offers to give this device to the temple. He kind of like right out of the gate is like a little aggressive about it, talking about how he wants to give this device to their so-called priest, who he calls a blasphemer as well. The residents of the temple are taken aback by this. I guess they have their own device for seeing the future, and so they decline the man and tell him to leave. But he doesn't leave, and he threatens them with dire consequences if they don't take his magic device, including raining tar on their houses, basically just destruction of the temple. This freaks the residents out, and they consider leaving the temple to some faraway place where no one can find them. There's definitely more to the story that I would like to know. The man with the magic device said he was sent by the king. If this is true, did the king know that this guy was going to be so aggressive, like right off the bat, and like threaten them? And if the king did know that, what does the king have against this temple? Does it have to do with them having their own magic device? I don't know. I would really like to hear a part 2 of this song, or maybe like a prequel or something, because I'm so interested in this story. Even though it's so simple and short, it like makes my imagination go wild. Despite the lack of closure, this is still one of my favorite songs on the album. Like I said, it's intense, it is driving, it gets me all amped up. And next we have Hob. Definitely more of a mellow song, and it's a sad one. It's kind of a downer. A man's infant child is sick with a likely fatal disease. The song mentions whooping cough. The kid is definitely close to death, and in desperation, the father approaches a hob hole. If you don't know what a hob is, I wasn't too sure of what it was either. It's like a little spirit that you can ask to do things for you, usually in return for something. He begs the hob to make his child well again, and then he returns home to find out that his child is cured. So the hob must have done something. Thank you, Hob. Kid grows up. Turns out the kid has some remarkable ability to see the future. It's mentioned in the song that the kid warns the village of like an impending drought, allowing them to prepare accordingly. You saved the village! Congratulations! The song doesn't end there. One day, the Hob actually visits the man's house, asks for the kid. It turns out that the father, in return for his child's health, in desperation, must have promised to give the kid to the Hob at some point. That's all I can imagine, because the kid belongs to the Hob. The kid leaves, and the song ends. The instrumentation here is dreary, kind of lethargic. It gives space for Dawson to tell his story. I like how the guitar melody sort of matches what he's doing in the vocal melody. That's a really nice touch. Did I say that last one was sad? Because Beggar is more sad. This is the story of a homeless man who has a doggo, little dog, a collie. Very cute dog. I've never seen it, but I'm just assuming. They are the best of friends. The homeless man talks about how he's had the dog since it was a puppy. Anyway, the man's village is attacked, and the dog freaks out, runs out, and gets attacked by the invaders, and is seriously wounded. Instead of rushing to the dog's aid, the man hides from the raiders, fearful for his own life, that's reasonable. It really is, but it is sad because the dog ends up dying and the man feels responsible for the dog's death. Even though he might not have been totally responsible, he feels like he could have done more to protect his dog. He sells the last of his belongings to buy a chicken for his dog to eat as a last meal. Very nice gesture. As he lays the dog to rest, all he wants is forgiveness from his dog. He's lamenting the fact that he feels responsible for her death. Yeah, this is a rough one emotionally. I don't own a dog. I've never owned a dog. I really hope to one day though. Even I have a visceral reaction to this song. The way Dawson delivers his lyrics, it sounds genuinely mournful. I feel sad for this guy. Even though it doesn't exist, I feel the same way as if a friend was going through the same situation. And am I crazy, or does the instrumentation here kind of sound like some of the Arcade Fire's early stuff? I'm just getting that vibe for some reason. The guitar melodies and the strings, I think. I'm just getting that feeling. The next track is called No One. I don't have a lot to talk about. It's just like an interlude track with no lyrics or real musical development. It does provide you with an opportunity to wipe your tears and collect yourself from the previous track though, so I appreciate it. And we come to the last track of the album, which is called Masseuse. It's definitely not as devastating as the last couple of tracks have been. This one is about a masseuse who is kind of bored with her job, fed up with massaging all day, which I suppose would get a little boring after a while. I think it'd be therapeutic at first, but if it was all you were doing, she becomes obsessed with this mystical pin that is supposed to grant eternal beauty to whoever has it. The problem is that some old blind monk has it. She tries to kill the monk and steal his pin, which doesn't go very well. The blind old monk ends up restraining her, reveals that the pin isn't real, it doesn't exist, it was just a prank. He shows her a pebble, and it's like, this is the pin. And for good measure, he steals her eyes. Which leads into the closing lyrics of the song, where Dawson and a chorus ironically play on the lyrics of Amazing Grace. I once could see, but now I'm blind, over a booming clash of instrumentals, which ends up being a very nice way to close out this track and this album. This song, I guess, could be accused of being too long, but it's not too long in my opinion. It's over 10 minutes, but it really doesn't feel like that, honestly, to me. Again, I think it's just because I'm so immersed in the story. And that's Peasant. I hope you enjoy the album as much as I do. I understand that I can't really do this album justice just by sitting here and talking about it, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Thanks for listening.